Patrick. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm keeping well, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing good, Mr. Bishop. I haven't seen you in such a long time.
I know, Mr. Wharton. It's been a while.
Probably in the break room at the big box store we both used to work at. Mm-hmm. I don't want to name it because I don't want you to end up with a target on your back or anything.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But I told you before that I always wanted to have you on the podcast and have this long-form conversation just because of the things that we always talk about on Facebook, and you're so knowledgeable. You used to be a professor, didn't you?
I taught business and marketing classes at the college level, yeah.
Okay. You taught business and marketing at the college level. What was that like?
It was a hoot.
It was a hoot?
Yeah, I loved it.
You loved it. Where at, or what part of the country at least?
Let's see. I've taught in New York City and New Jersey. I've taught here in Fredericksburg at Germanna, and I've taught at Georgetown University.
Okay, cool. How long did you live in New York for?
From 99 until about 2010.
Okay. So, not too long before I met you, you moved back here.
Yeah.
Huh. I'm thinking about going to New York myself for comedy, but...
If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Yeah. It's closer to home. I do think that I'll fit in better. My vibe and my culture, everything that I'm doing will fit in better in LA and at the Comedy Store. And that's where I really want to be in my heart of hearts. But for right now, New York seems to be more plausible.
You'll definitely get some good experience there.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think my fast-paced style in comedy, at least my quick-witted jokes, the way they've been lately, that will fit the pace of the city. You know what I mean? Because when you watch comedy, I don't know how big of a fan of comedy you are, how much you watch, but when you watch like New York comedians versus LA comedians, you can kind of see a difference in pace of how they talk. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think that has to do with the vibe of the city, the culture of the city.
I've never been to LA, so I don't know, but I've spent enough time in New York to say that it's a good place to polish and hone your craft. Any kind of performing art.
Right, yeah.
Audiences can be harsh.
Yeah.
But that's how you learn.
Yeah. I think that also has to do with, like I said, once again, the pace of the city. Mm-hmm. Maybe that brings out the more critical of everybody.
Well, when I was teaching up there, I tried to present my lectures as more like a show.
Right.
And my students as the audience. So I can attest to having students from New York City, what the crowds are like.
Right. Yeah.
There's a vibe. It's got a vibe that's unlike any place else.
Yeah. Plus, I like the whole culture, like the kind of the metro culture too. I mean, it's metro in DC, but I like the subway kind of walking around.
Wait until you've ridden the subway a few times before you draw a conclusion about the New York City subway.
Okay.
The MTA is something else.
Yeah, I imagine that it gets hectic.
Hectic, and it's like a Japanese train where everybody is crammed in, only there's no air conditioning. It's the middle of summer. It's like 90 degrees outside, and it's like 114 inside. Everybody is smelling and stinking and sweating, and
it sounds fun.
That's why I moved to Virginia, man. I was like, I need to be near a farm or something.
No, what I've been thinking about, that's another thing I've been thinking about New York, is because I kind of want to keep Fredericksburg as my home base. I do have a certain love for Fredericksburg. There's a certain panache or something, there's a certain energy or something here, and it's caught in kind of that weird in-between of the country and the suburbs and the city.
Virginia is a good place to come home to.
Yeah.
I was raised here.
Okay.
And it was I started having adventures to finish college, go to graduate school. I went to graduate school in New York, in the city, and taught there for a number of years, and had an opportunity to come back. And by that time I had moved to Newark, New Jersey. And not the nice part of it either.
Right, yeah. It can be a harsh city, for sure.
it's the Calcutta of the Western Hemisphere. Well, the way Calcutta used to be. Filthy, the sidewalks were sticky, and it smelled bad. Trash everywhere, and man, I was so ready to breathe clean air,
Yeah.
to have a forest adjacent to my yard that I could go for a walk in if I felt like it. So, Virginia and Fredericksburg is a good place to come back to.
Yeah. And I feel like even with all the development they're doing around here right now, and as they do every month and every year, and as the city is growing and property values are going up, this city and this area is still always going to have a certain level of preservation because of the Civil War sites.
That's absolutely the truth.
So because of that, you're never going to go without nature. You know what I mean? It's never going to be totally urban.
Let's hope.
Yeah, let's
Although
hope.
I feel like we already have too many used car dealerships up and down Route 1.
Yeah, that 4 Mile Fork, and we're not far from 4 Mile Fork right
Right.
now. It's car dealer central. I mean, is there anywhere else in the country that has that many car dealerships stacked on top of each other like that?
I'm
It's
sure
ridiculous.
there must be. But I remember when I lived in Oklahoma, there was a stretch between Norman, Oklahoma and Oklahoma City, which is like 25, 30 minutes away, that where it was similar. It was just development, and so many used car lots. So I think that this is a pattern of development.
Yeah,
And where land is cheap, it doesn't seem like it's cheap because we're in the midst of it.
right.
But compared to other more urban places, land out here is cheap. A lot of these places that are going up on land that was never anything except the farms,
Right.
you know. So these low profit margin businesses with maybe a little sketchy practices are easy to just dump on cheap land.
Yeah,
So I think that's what's going on.
that makes sense. I think there's definitely some truth to that. But yeah, I don't know. There's still something special around here. You know what I mean? There's just a certain something. But yeah, there is a overdevelopment happening. I guess it's because we're like a suburb that the DC suburb is just moving southern, and Richmond suburb too is moving northern, and
Yes.
we're caught right in the middle of that wave.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, when I moved here, when my family moved to Fredericksburg, it was 1974. We had 2 McDonald's. There was the one out here at Mine Road and Jeff Davis, Route 1. And there was the one downtown near the college. And that was it.
damn,
There was a few other little mom and pop places, the usual a Wendy's, a Hardee's, a Burger King, you know. But then it's grown explosively compared to the way I remember it as a child.
yeah,
It's a much different place. When I moved back, I was shocked at the amount of traffic. And out on Route 3, you know where the Spotsylvania Town Center is now. When I was a kid, that was a field with a pond in it. And I remember in the early '80s when they built the mall, what
right,
we used to call the Spotsylvania Town Center, and there would not be a road. There would not be a car on that road. You know, very light traffic. But if you ever try to go out there now, it's as bad as any other place I've ever lived in terms of how long you have to sit in a car to go 1.5 miles.
yeah. It's dense over there. Traffic is bad.
Yeah, well, I have strong opinions about development, partly because of my interest in the paranormal. I have a lot of respect for the dead.
Yeah,
And since so much of this land used to be farms and plantations, you cannot build anything without disturbing somebody's grave.
right. Yeah,
Probably the grave of a slave.
yeah,
And so I think that growth is important, economic development is important, but we're disturbing things, and it stirs up activity.
yeah. So that's something I wanted to get into. One of the main topics that wanted to talk about. Probably one of the main reasons people are tuning in. We were talking about the tenor of the town. I think we got some of the bullshit small talk out of the way, like traffic and
Yeah.
they're developing things. But something I alluded to earlier was the battlefields. And Fredericksburg is probably, not only is it one of the oldest cities, but it's also one of the most haunted places on the East Coast.
It's the worst kept secret, how haunted this area is. And if you go downtown to some of those old historic homes, they have a reputation for being haunted. But if you talk to any of the people that live there, they're like, no, we don't have a ghost. But there's photographs that people have taken of the front of the building where like a Confederate soldier is standing on the other side of the window staring out at you. And mists and all kinds of mysterious things, anomalies in the photographs. And it's just like around this area, the dead seem to outnumber the living. They're around us all the time, probably around us right now.
Yeah, probably. I mean,
this is built on the edge of a battlefield.
Yeah, we're right here by Lee Hill Battlefield. So it is literally the edge of the battlefield.
Yeah.
Robert E. Lee and those fellows probably walked right through here when this was all woods and stuff.
I wouldn't be surprised. Well, there was very few woods. It was mostly just, as far as the eye could see, fields.
Okay.
With a manor house there and a manor house there, plantation houses outside of town. And every once in a while an inn, you know.
Right.
So, or a post office or something.
Right.
So, up to the time of the American Civil War, there's photographs of the battles, you know, and trees are hard to spot.
Okay.
But yeah, you're right. It was undeveloped, and I'm sure that Route 1 is right over here, and that was the main drag between Washington D.C. and all points south, especially Richmond.
Yeah.
So armies have marched up and down and past and through this area many times.
Yeah, yeah. Colonial revolutionary times as well as, I'm sure there was, I mean, you know, George Washington, you got to think his father built that house over there right across from the river, right across from the city. And
Ferry Farm.
At Ferry Farm. And, you know, George and I know some other guys, they would spend time at the, is it the Sunken Well? What's the other tavern that's right there on
Rising Sun Tavern?
The Rising Sun Tavern. And that's kind of one of the places that they would talk about revolution and things of that nature.
Several of the founding fathers used to meet up there and, you know, knock back a few pints.
Right, yeah.
And talk politics.
Right, like there, and then what's the one in Boston? The Green Dragon or something like that. In Philadelphia, also the whatever place that they went to, but that's where the Continental Congress and all of that stuff was. So, really, a lot of people don't realize that Fredericksburg was an important city, kind of in that chain of, you know, Fredericksburg, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, and Boston.
Well, Virginia in particular. So many of the founding fathers.
Yeah.
We've had more presidents come from Virginia than from any other state.
Yeah.
You had Washington, you had Jefferson, you had James Monroe, Madison.
Yep.
And then there's all of the Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. Dude was from Virginia.
Okay.
Henrico County. And so, you know, there was lots of thinking going on around here.
Right, yeah.
And lots of hobnobbing.
Yeah.
And strategizing.
Yeah.
So at every level, you know, and there's a monument to Hugh Mercer and all these other guys from that period as well. It's not, everybody thinks of Virginia and Fredericksburg in particular and Spotsylvania as being Civil War.
Yeah.
And absolutely, some of the worst fighting
sure.
that ever took place on the surface of this earth took place in Spotsylvania County. But
and most of the worst battles in the Civil War happened here. I know everyone knows Gettysburg, but they ran through Fredericksburg multiple times. Yeah.
Fredericksburg was shelled to pieces twice.
Yeah.
You know, in December 62, and then again in 64, I think.
And all the battlefields at Chancellorsville and Spotsy Courthouse, and I mean the area is just littered with them.
Yeah, if anybody is interested in seeing what the first really modern war looked like, you can just Google Bloody Angle. Yeah. And
actually just saw the tree stump the other day at the Smithsonian for the Bloody Angle.
Full of bullet holes, right?
Yeah. Well, it's like a stump that was broken by a cannonball, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, whatever trees were out there, they got, mowed down just by the amount of lead flying back and forth.
Yeah, yeah. But, like I was saying, a lot of we'll get into ghosts in a minute. I want to get into something else. So a lot of revolutionary planning, colonial town. George Washington's father, one of the oldest Freemason lodges in the country. Martha Washington was a prominent revolutionary woman. Our college is named after her. We have the
Mary.
Sorry, Martha was
Martha's
George's wife.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah, duh. What am I thinking?
Well, she was a genius in her own right. Martha was as well.
Yeah.
She didn't have all the benefits of an education that were available, but she was smart. She knew what she was doing, and a good right hand person for someone like Washington.
Yeah. But the town is built by kind of these people, you know what I mean? And these Freemasons, you can literally see it, the design of the town and the streets. It's kind of a smaller scale of Alexandria.
Yes.
Which Alexandria is literally designed like a compass, right? Like the what is it? The compass and what is it? What's the other tool?
Well, you've got the compass. There is a mortar, and there is the angle.
Yeah, the angle. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So that's always interested me too, since I found out about that, and also that his father was a land surveyor, a Freemason. So I assume that he was into like geomancy and things of that nature too.
Possibly.
And understood maybe like ley lines and energies of the earth, certain things of that nature. It's always found it special or important that he decided to build that house where he did at Ferry Farm, and that they built this town where they did in the way that they did for a particular reason, that they saw something that we don't, or we can't.
I would certainly agree that people before the Industrial Revolution were probably more in touch with the natural world than most modern people understand or could appreciate. And those sorts of things would influence decision making as well. Maybe not even on a conscious level. It's like we know what ley lines are, but ley lines were not invented at the time of. I mean, they hadn't been. The phrase had not been coined.
Right. Yeah.
When Washington was around, or when the founders in the 1600s settled the Fredericksburg area.
Right.
But they probably walked into the place and they're like, "This is a good place. This is a good place to build a town."
Right.
And just on an instinctive level, because they were.
Or it was just the river, and I'm just looking too deep into things.
Well, I think there are practical considerations as well for why they chose the area, why they chose to build Fredericksburg where they did is on the fall line. That's as far into Virginia as you can sail before you run out of navigable water.
Right.
To the east of Fredericksburg, the Rappahannock River is a deep enough river that you can bring big ships up the river and dock them at Fredericksburg. But the fall line is right at Fredericksburg, and that's as far west as you can sail on the Rappahannock. And they solved that problem. They wanted to get their ships as far west as they could, because as the land to the west of Fredericksburg was being settled and developed into agriculture, they had to get wheat and corn and potatoes and tobacco, cotton, from the foothills, and they didn't want to have to walk it or put it on wagons any farther than they absolutely had to.
Right.
Ships are easy, so this was as far inland as they could get in a big ship, and they eventually extended that by building locks and dams so that barges could float down the river, but they never sailed a big ship past the fall line. Okay. So there's that. That's a practical consideration that would figure into the economic development. For a while there, Fredericksburg was as big in terms of import and export as New York City was at the same time.
Wow.
Hard to imagine.
Yeah.
But the river wasn't maintained, and it silted up, and it wasn't dredged properly, and finally New York City beat Fredericksburg. Can you imagine what Fredericksburg would be like now? It would be like New York City.
Had they maintained the river better?
Had economic and other factors. You know, the North was always more industrial than the South was, even from the beginning of the country.
Right.
And the Industrial Revolution took a long time to take off in the South because we had slavery. Slavery both suppressed and it stimulated the Industrial Revolution in a way. It provided the wealth that let the slave owner invest his money in like factories in Europe to get new equipment and stuff, and that was that was part of what stimulated the Industrial Revolution, was the availability of this money that was made available because these rich white people owned slaves and were benefiting from the fruits of the labor of all these involuntary servants.
Yeah.
But so the South was slower to have industrial development than the North was, because most of the northern states freed their slaves not long after the Revolution.
Okay. No, I definitely. Sometimes I get too weird and metaphysical, I guess. But do you think?
We live in a mysterious universe.
Yeah, we do live in a very mysterious universe, and there's things outside of our vision, and outside, even as much as you and I would like to think that we know and have a knowledge of, there's still probably a vast majority of things on a spiritual level and on a energy level that we don't have a full understanding of. That maybe, like you were saying, before the Industrial Revolution and more primitive times, that man did have an understanding of, and then would base his decisions on where to build or etc. Based on those decisions. I mean, you look back at the Egyptians and the pyramids. They're built on such a, they're basically built right on the latitude lines, I think, latitude or longitude lines, and they're just built in such a way. They're built under Orion's belt, and I know that a lot of ancient civilizations navigated by the stars and stuff like that. But
well, they had to until they discovered the magnetic compass.
Right.
But there's lots of things about the pyramids and other things that are built in Egypt that show just how in tune they were with the world around them, in a way, and a level that would be totally unfamiliar to us.
Yeah.
Most of us, anyway.
And then, like I was saying, and then you have Freemasons that were here, which Freemasons come from Europe, and that's where you see a lot of like churches built on ley lines and stuff like that. So I think some of that did come here specifically to this area. Do you feel that? Do you see that? What is Caroline Street has all the churches are going down Caroline Street.
It was not uncommon for towns that were being built to have most of the houses of worship on a street.
Okay.
But why did they choose that street as opposed to some other? Maybe those kinds of influences were having an impact on that decision.
Right.
I'm sure that some local historian who knows more about the developmental history of the area could answer that question better than I could. But there are places that do seem special, right?
Yeah.
How many old European churches are built atop sacred sites to the pre-Christian people that live there? Druids and Roman pagans and things like that. Whenever they do a renovation on a church in Europe or Italy, France, or even in the UK, they often find the remains of prehistoric temple sacred sites. And that figures into the whole ley line thing that you brought up, Scott, is that people had an instinct, like the geese know which way is north.
Right.
And which way is south, so that they can fly the appropriate direction. They have an instinct, a feel for which way to go. And I think that people, because they have a spiritual depth to them, have a spiritual instinct about which places are places that are separate, that are different. They're not mundane. There's something sacred about this place.
Right.
And almost doesn't make any difference what religion we're talking about. Whether it's the Druids or the Romans or the Zoroastrians. I can write the word, but pronouncing it is hard.
Yeah.
But one religion after the other, Islam comes in and it builds its mosques on the ruins of old churches and other sacred sites wherever it went during the period of its most rapid expansion. So this instinct that humans have for special places where maybe there's a special energy, that seems to be, there is evidence, I will say it that way. There's evidence that is a real thing.
Do you think that there could be, let's go back to the, just the practical, economic, them building the town here, right, because of the fall line, right? What if there's, a certain feng shui that man can induce. So they would build towns in a certain way, right? That's why they have the square and the compass or what the fuck ever, to try and induce a certain energy flow in the town. The same way that in current day China, is feng shui, right? Is what I'm thinking of. How they'll literally cut holes out of buildings. I don't know if you've ever seen that. They'll cut holes out of skyscrapers so that the energy can flow.
I didn't know they were building skyscrapers with holes in them for that purpose.
Can you look that up, Scott?
But I do know that you know that's a real principle over there. That these telluric forces, these underground spiritual currents, can affect things like your physical health and how cheerful you are.
Yeah.
And you know, whether or not most families fight.
Right.
You know, whether your cattle are gonna grow big or be
I wonder
sickly.
if the families fighting thing comes back to like a residual energy.
There are certainly things that can influence a family's behavior. If there is, for instance, a negative entity,
Yeah.
that's more of an organized thing than just talking about the natural flow of whatever earth chi there is.
Right.
That is moving along ley lines and things.
Maybe that's what it was I was thinking of as chi.
Well, chi and
Feng shui.
Yeah, feng shui. I pulled it up. They're called dragon gates.
Okay.
And they say, particularly in Hong Kong, they have these things.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah,
That's strange.
they have a couple in Manhattan as well. I've seen these things before.
Okay.
There's a couple buildings in Manhattan that have these things.
But yeah, so maybe it's a certain level of. That's one thing about the pyramids that I was a video that I watched recently was talking about. It's kind of talking about the Tesla code and things, but then it was talking about frequency and how they were thinking that the pyramids were built in this, because it looks like it has four sides, but there actually is a little bit of an indent on each side, right? Mm-hmm. So they're saying this octagonal shape on the inside, right, creates a certain frequency and a certain resonance. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I just thought there's something interesting about that. There's, you know, these ancient civilizations had an understanding of that. And then, so I don't know. I just wonder if maybe there is some forced energy that they could have put into the town.
I don't know. You know, we've always assumed the popular scholarly interpretation of the pyramids is it's a place to bury the pharaoh.
Right.
And I don't know if that's all that they were supposed to be. There have been lots of theories, and they said that, well, it's a temple, and the pharaoh may have been buried in it somewhere, but the parts that we know about were used on a routine basis by the living to like initiate people into the Osiris mysteries or the mysteries of Isis and
Hermes.
Mm-hmm. But as far as, you know, the actual shape of the thing, there was a book that you could get in the 1970s and the 80s called Pyramid Power. There was 2 volumes, and I had both of them, and it made what to me as a younger person seemed to be very persuasive arguments that the actual pyramid shape itself has metaphysical properties.
Yeah.
They were doing things like, well, here's a razor blade. Now, if I'm going to shave my face every day with this razor blade, and at night I'm going to put it back in my little pyramid keeper. And the angles were supposedly the same angles as the pyramid of Khufu, Cheops's pyramid. And as long as he kept his razor blade inside that little pyramid stand, the place for it, then it didn't ever go dull. And they were doing experiments with like yogurt and things.
Yeah, fruit and all this.
Yeah, to see how long they would last. And they would put, you know, in the interest of like at least making a stab at doing something scientific, a scientific method, they would put the same kind of samples in other boxes of different shapes, like a sphere and a cube and things like that. And then they would measure how long it takes for the milk to turn into yogurt. And based on those experiments, as reported in this book, they did seem to support the notion that there is something special about that shape. I haven't done any experiments on that shape myself, but maybe some point in the future. I've got other experiments that I want to do.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting things about the pyramids, and talking about how much more in touch ancient people were with their environment in the natural world, if you look at the physical dimensions of the interior spaces where the people would go, they are often designed with acoustics in mind. There are some famous temples in Malta that go back to the Stone Age. They were old when they started building the pyramids. And those places are set up so that if a person stands in the corner over there and is chanting or singing, the resonances that get set up in that physical space, remember it's all stone, have a mind-altering effect on everybody else in the room.
Okay.
And when you look at the dimensions, when they were building the pyramids, the king's chamber, where the sarcophagus is in the pyramid of Khufu, its dimensions, length and width and height, and even from corner to corner, my own calculations on that, because I was interested, I wanted to see what were the notes that would resonate most strongly in that empty space, in a space of that shape and those dimensions. And I generated them on the computer and let them run for about 30 minutes. And I will say it gave me a buzz.
Yeah, because you play a lot of music and stuff too. You play piano, and so you say it gave you a buzz, huh?
It was, you know that feeling that you get when the elevator just starts to go down?
Yeah.
Turn that feeling down, and that's the feeling that I had just sitting there.
Right.
The sense of not exactly falling, but a sense of motion.
I've grabbed certain crystals and rocks, and they've given me that feeling, like a lightness feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever encountered anything?
Not with crystals. When it comes to like paranormal abilities and psychic sensitivities, I'm a flat line for the most part. Sometimes, if I'm on a ghost hunt, I will get goosebumps, but anybody would. I'm not one of those people. I'm not the kind of investigator who thinks that they have gifts and can say, oh, in that corner over there, there's a Civil War widow, and she's wringing her hands, and she's waiting for her husband to come home from the battle, and he never did, and she's still waiting for him to come home. There are people that
are mediums.
That at least think they have the gift. I think that there are people who genuinely are gifted in that way, but I can't read their mind to know whether or not what they are telling me is something they're really seeing, something they think they're seeing, or just something they want me to think they're seeing.
Right.
I think that it works like this. For every one person who has that authentic gift, there's probably 100 who think they do but don't. And it's also on a continuum. There's some people who are switched on all the time. And then there are some people who have the gift, but it only comes now and then.
Right.
But they are authentically gifted. And for every one of those, there's 100 who think they have a gift, but really don't. For every one of those, there's 100 who know they don't, but they want you and me to think they do. Now, how do I separate all those people from that one that has that authentic gift?
Because it's something that it's unseen and unproven, so
it's difficult.
Yeah,
It takes the game to a next level of complexity, and I like to keep things simple.
Yeah. I would appreciate that as someone going on a ghost tour or doing an investigation, that the person leading it was more practically minded. And not that you're practical minded, you still believe in supernatural, metaphysical things. Clearly you have interest in the metaphysics and such. But you're not like a showman in that way, or it's very cut and dry. Like this is the facts of it. Here's what I can show you of it. I would appreciate that, but I could see how other people would appreciate a more interactive experience, I guess.
People, well, if you're talking about something like a ghost tour,
right?
I've taken people on ghost tours, and I can't influence or control the ghosts to put on a show for these people.
Yeah.
So what I've done is on my own investigations, I've made recordings where I'm asking questions, and sometimes I get an answer. And on my ghost tours, I will play those answers back for my guests, the live people. And sometimes the ghosts will put on a show for the live people. They'll knock on things. You can hear them walking down a hallway. No live person is in. Sometimes you can hear them talking, murmuring from the next room. But my own personal approach when I'm doing investigations is for the science. I want to make a discovery, and so the things that I bring with me are simple things, things to measure magnetic fields, things to record audio, and a camera is also necessary, although getting photographic or video evidence is unusual.
That's something I wanted to talk about too when we were talking about the pyramids, the town, ley lines, kind of haunted places, is the magnetic fields and geologic anomalies, right? Is that proper terminology?
Sure.
One example I'll use is I watched an episode of like Ghost Adventures or whatever. I know you're probably like, for your craft, they're probably someone that you kind of scratch your head at or something.
I think that
you hate
I think that what we see on those kinds of shows is what you have to put on those kinds of shows if you want to have a show.
Right.
Nobody's going to watch a bunch of guys sitting in a room for 6 hours as quiet as they can.
Right.
Zach Bagans has to do something to get people to watch the show.
Right. But one thing, one episode in particular, they went to Celio Drive, which is, that's where the Manson murders happened.
Okay. Yeah.
So they were right down the street from where the Manson murders happened, and this guy wanted to have them do a tour or whatever, an investigation, and his house was literally built on a hill, and then there was like it was like an Indian burial ground or an Indian kind of sacred site that was like down this hill or where they had built this Celio Drive basically, and when they were trying to do like the magnetic readings, it was throwing their shit through loops. And you see that happen in other places. I mean, that's Bermuda Triangle. It's supposed to be another place like that.
I've heard about that. What was it? The Tate murders. It was Manson,
Sharon Tate.
Right. And heard. I think I may have even seen the episode that you're talking about, and that got me thinking. And I looked at the U.S. Geological Survey database for that part of California, and that particular hill has got much higher magnetic field than it's supposed to. One of the units that we use to measure magnetic fields is the Gauss. And now the Earth's natural magnetic field falls in a range. It fluctuates all the time, but it falls in a range.
Sorry.
It's all good. Falls in a range between 200 milligauss and about 700 milligauss. So anything much higher than 700 milligauss is weird. That's probably not a normal thing. And if you're on an investigation and you've got your magnetometer and you encounter a magnetic field that is much above 700 milligauss, then you have to explain it, because it's unusual for the Earth to produce a field that strong. But that whole mountain, that whole hill that neighborhood is built on is an officially registered geomagnetic anomaly.
Okay.
Because the field there is so much higher. Now, if people have an instinct, like
if the Native Americans
like the geese know which way is north, right? Then for thousands of years, people are going to consider that, if they have an instinct for it, they're going to consider that place to be special, different somehow, maybe in a good way, maybe in an ominous way, but it's not going to register like the rest of the landscape does on them. And I think that's, you're right. There's Native American, they didn't live there. That's where they buried people. And because they knew that it was special somehow.
Right.
They didn't have magnetometers, but
exactly.
They still had an instinct for it.
They still had an instinct and understood that
Yeah.
there was something there. I wonder if they, buried their people there because they thought that, because they felt whatever magnetic pulse or whatever there was coming from that, whatever resonance frequency comes from that, and maybe they thought that helped guide their ancestors towards the afterlife or back towards the, the Creator. I think some of the idea with that is kind of like it's the Big Bang frequency, right? That's kind of what that video on the pyramids that I watched was talking about, where they were talking about how it was inducing a certain resonance and frequency inside of the pyramids. And the idea, the concept was that they're trying to recreate the afterlife.
My
So I think there's
own
something to that.
hypothesis is similar to that. I think that what they were trying to do when they were building these pyramids, the big ones, was to build a resurrection machine. So that
Right.
if you died, they'd bury you in this thing, and over some period of time, you came back to life, either as a physical person or as like a more highly evolved on a spiritual plane kind of a thing. And they wanted to make sure. And the pyramid, look at the interior of the Pyramid of Cheops. It doesn't look like a machine to us, but what I think they are building is a resurrection machine. And it's got parts, and I think those parts are supposed to work together in certain ways. And lots of other people have said something like that.
So it's like a form of necromancy, basically, that they're...
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say necromancy. It's not just about reviving the dead or summoning the spirits of the dead to send them off on errands for you. That's really what necromancy is like, and to tell you the future and things. But I think that the king was so important, and in Egypt, the king was the incarnation of a god,
Right.
that he got special treatment. And I do know that when they opened those pyramids, they didn't find any bodies inside.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So do you think that Fredericksburg could have any geologic anomalies? Sorry, before we get into that, do you think that because Manson and them, they were doing LSD all the time and stuff. They had been there to a party before. That's why they came back to the house. Do you think because of them being on LSD and being, when I take LSD, I feel like I'm more in tune with the universe and with energies and intentions and things like that. So do you think that them being on the LSD and then being in that geologic anomaly kind of drew them back there? Obviously, he was fucking evil and trying to do screwed up shit. But I wonder if some of the magnetic forces there had anything to do with their draw to...
I can't say no. I don't know. Trying to understand the mind of a madman like Charles Manson is impossible for a person who is a rational thinking person to do. I don't know what role drugs had in like turning up the volume on their sensitivity,
Right.
and so they were gravitating towards this because their instincts are pulling them towards that place, or whether they had pre-selected Sharon.
And that's definitely practical.
I don't know
economic
enough.
reason.
I don't know enough about that case. I studied Manson just as an anomaly, as an anomalous person, and the sociology of the interactions between him and the people in his group,
Yeah.
as an example of cults
Right.
and what kind of things can go wrong. And he's not the only example, many examples, but I don't know. So bottom line, I don't know, and I don't know enough about it to have an opinion about whether or not those conditions influenced what happened there. But I'm reasonably certain that the weird geomagnetic condition of that area must have a role to play in how haunted it is.
Right. That and with something being haunted like that, or being kind of a, for lack of a better term, a portal or a gateway for spirits to be more free
To manifest.
Right? And then be able to latch on to people.
I think that it's kind of like a watering hole hypothesis.
Right. I wonder what other kind of strange shit happens around up there on Celio Drive that we don't hear about.
Who knows? I'm sure that nobody's going to talk about it if they want to keep their property values up.
Right. Right.
That's the
Same
problem.
with downtown Fredericksburg.
Yeah. Although people are so hip now with paranormal, the fact that these shows get so many people watching them, you might find the right buyer who's willing to pay more for a haunted house. If I was buying like an 18th century house or something, the first question I would ask is this place haunted? And the realtor, I can just see the blood drain from the face of the realtor and the owner of the house. And I'd be like, no, I'm cool. I'm not going to buy the house unless it has a ghost in it.
Right.
You know, there's a people like me who would pay more
That's true.
for
at least
who are not going to run away from the deal because it's got a ghost in it.
Right.
It kind of depends on what the ghost does too.
Yeah. As we talked about, it's definitely me getting into weird speculations, and it was just more or less the connections that Manson had, and them wanting to make an example out of certain people, and wrong place, wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it isn't all geomagnetic weird shit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just that rich humans built houses there because there's an energy there, or it's it's a cliffside or whatever.
Yeah.
It looks down in the city. But I would like to know. I do wonder how much other strange things happens out there, like you said, property values and people being weird. Do you think, all that being said, do you think that Fredericksburg has any weird geomagnetic pulses? Have you ever you have what is it called to do those readings?
Magnetometer.
A magnetometer.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever taken it to sacred sites in Fredericksburg?
I take it everywhere. It's built into your phone. Every smartphone has got magnetometers on board.
Okay.
And the reason they are there is so that even when your phone is in airplane mode, it always knows which way is north.
Okay.
So you've got a magnetometer, and you don't have to be connected to any network. The phone knows which way is north. So you could use the phone as a compass. And there's a number of apps that you can download that are perfectly free that work at taking the data generated by your onboard magnetometers on your phone and turning them into numbers that you can see, or a graphic format.
Okay.
So if you've got a phone, you've got ghost hunting equipment.
Okay.
I shy away from most of the ghost hunting apps, but for something simple that's just telling me how strong the magnetic field is, it's perfectly fine. It's a scientific instrument.
Okay.
You can test it. You can take like a fridge magnet, start your magnetometer app, and bring the magnet in proximity to the phone, and you'll see the numbers. You'll see the needle move. So I take this on every investigation that I go. And if anything weird happens, that's the first thing I do is pop that thing out and start that app. And I have encountered some really high magnetic field readings that I could not trace to a human source, like wiring in the walls or something.
Right.
Because it's out in the middle of a field and it's transient. It's there for a little while and then it's gone. And in my experience as an investigator, it doesn't happen every single time, but if I see a large spike in the magnetic field, that often comes right before the dead move something or make some kind of a noise.
Right.
And it's like they're building up energy, and then they discharge it so that they can manifest.
Right.
And magnetism, either it's a source of energy or they're producing it as they get ready to manifest. So, yeah, and as far as like, is there anything weird as part of the natural magnetic field background of Fredericksburg? I haven't encountered it. It's only when the paranormal stuff is happening that I see those high fields, and they'll be really high. I was talking about how the Earth's natural field is between 200 and like 700 milligauss. I will get like 23,000 milligauss, which is, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's strong enough to like move metal objects, if there's any around. They'll be drawn to that field, and there's nothing in this room that is putting out a field that strong. You could take a magnetometer and put it on the laptop or any of this equipment here, and you won't get a field that strong. So if you're out in the middle of a cemetery or a battlefield, and you come across 2,300 milligauss field, it's not being generated by technology.
Right.
And it's super unusual for the Earth to produce a field that strong, even like during solar storms and stuff. So
Seems to be something supernatural.
yeah, there's well, you know, we talk about the paranormal and the supernatural, and if you ask any two paranormal investigators what the paranormal means, you'll probably get two different answers. I feel like the more scientific investigators in the paranormal field are in the position of Isaac Newton when he saw the apple fall from the tree, which is a real thing. He wrote it down and he said this is what happened. It didn't hit him in the head like it does in the cartoons, but he watched an apple fall and he asked himself, why doesn't it ever fall sideways? Why doesn't it fall up sometimes? Why is it always falling straight to the ground and not at a tangent to the ground? And so he hypothesized and he did some calculations, and he came up with the theory of gravity, which he described as a force. And he got to the point where he could calculate it and explain the orbit of the moon around the Earth and the Earth around the sun with numbers, crunch the numbers, and tell you exactly where it's going to be next year at this time, or in 3 months or 3 days, and project backwards to where it was 6 months ago, what it would look like. But he still didn't know what gravity was. He was measuring it. He was measuring it sufficiently well to perform calculations that explained the motions of heavenly bodies and bullets as they go through the air and hit the ground, parabolic. He understood it well enough to put numbers on it, and it works really well. You can fly to the moon based on Newtonian mechanics, the inverse square law and everything else. But he didn't know what it was. He called it a force. And now, we didn't know what it was until Einstein came along and said that when you have matter in a place, it affects the curvature of the space-time continuum. Mm-hmm. And it's not really a force at all. It's an effect that matter has on space-time.
Yeah.
And so now we know what it is, and that's how I feel about paranormal. You could say that in Newton's time, gravity was a paranormal thing, and he was studying the paranormal in his own way.
Right.
He was he observed a phenomenon, he was trying to explain it. And within the context of the science of the day, there was no way to account for the force of gravity that makes the Earth and the apple attract each other. And so we're in that position now, very early stages of the field, with all kinds of discoveries to be made. And the role of things like ley lines and geomagnetic forces. You know, when I've noticed that there's one spot that I've done more investigations than any other. I did an investigation there basically once a month for like 7 years, at least once a month. And I would see the level of paranormal activity wax and wane there. Some days it would be off the charts. You'd feel them touch you. You could hold out your hand and say, "Would you take my hand?" And you'd feel fingers on your hand. You're alone in the room. You'll run your audio recorder and ask questions, and it's an empty room. But when you listen to the recording, it sounds like a live person is answering your questions. Then there are other days when it's a flat line, and you never know that the place was haunted. And I've tried to correlate that with things like solar sunspot activity, right, and the phase of the moon and the weather and how far along we are and how many days is it until the equinox and whether a storm is blowing through.
Did you ever look at the dates themselves?
Well, in terms, I've quantified it this way. I've looked at how many days go by and tried to see, well, on this day it was high and that day it was low. How many days was that? And then look for that repeating pattern. And what I have found is that there is no repeating pattern, at least not at that location.
By the dates, what I meant was, I'm really into Tesla, and Tesla kind of, I'm a little bit into like numerology and stuff, but Tesla got me into numbers in a weird way. It's probably just a form of OCD, but his 369 Tesla code.
Oh yeah.
So one thing that I always look for, like this microphone's 990, that's Tesla code, right?
Okay.
But I always will add up the numbers. So 9 plus 9 is 18.
And then 8 plus 1 is 9.
Right. So a lot of times when I see a series of numbers, I break it down in that way, mm-hmm, until I get it to its lowest to see if it's a 3, 6, or a 9.
I have not done that.
So I wonder if there's something about that. You know what I mean?
It's possible. I was like counting days. You know, I'm like I was looking for some kind of a cycle that showed me that, oh, well, every 36 days there's a lull in which nothing happens. And then I was expecting, what I was aiming for and hoping to find was, you know, a normal shaped curve, a bell-shaped curve, where the activity on this day is low, it peaks so many days later, and then it declines again, and then that whole system repeats, so that I could predict what day would be, I'd get the most bang for my buck on an investigation, because I want to show up on the day when the activity is, when it's easier for them to manifest. So But those are the
Seems to
kinds
be
of
random. There's no real pattern to it.
something is influencing it. It's clearly easier on some days than it is on others for them to make sounds we can hear and detect.
So you feel like there is a variable that's affecting. I wonder if it's a person in the house or something like that.
That's a reasonable hypothesis that should be testable under certain circumstances. But yeah, I didn't find a pattern. I wouldn't say that it's random. There does seem to be some correlation. Now, the other approach is to simply ask the dead.
Right, that's true.
You know, instead of trying to read between the, and you do have to read between the lines a lot, but
Usually when you're messing with mysteries of the universe, it speaks to you in riddles.
yes, that's true. But at the battlefield here in Fredericksburg on Lee Drive, I asked point blank, does the moon influence your ability? Does the moon phase have anything to do with how easy it is for you to make sounds that I can hear? And the answer was yes. But I've asked that question 100 times, and I've maybe gotten 5 answers, and from the other side. And those answers do not necessarily reinforce each other. They don't corroborate each other necessarily.
Right.
Sometimes they will say, no, it's too cold. I'm like, well, what does cold have to do with it? So that was another thing I started investigating, looking at temperature, what the weather is like. But
I wonder if barometric pressure has anything to do with it. You know, when a thunderstorm comes through and it's raining all the time, that affects that affects our mood, that affects us, it affects a lot of things. So I wonder if barometric pressure could have any...
it could be a set of nested variables in which,
right, yeah.
like there's a person, and that person is the thing that juices the environment, that puts the energy into the environment so that a ghost can, you know, do that, just that, and which is a big deal. But maybe that person is only broadcasting whatever energy it is when it's raining, or when the air is electrified because of a passing thunderstorm.
Right.
So that might account for certain other things, you know, like some people's ability to be clairvoyant or to have precognition, to see things before they happen.
Yeah.
Those weather and other kind of variables may have an influence on that as well.
How much do you talk to Cheryl about stuff like this? Do you ever talk to Cheryl?
Sure. She
About Grove of Bright Blessings.
you're talking about Cheryl.
Yeah, Cheryl from the Grove. Cheryl and Norm.
Howdy Cheryl.
Yes, how to Cheryl. She's really into metaphysics
Yes.
and
I buy my incense briquettes and my frankincense from her shop.
I go there for my candles. Yeah.
She's got a million crystals.
Yeah, she does.
If you're into crystals, check it out. But I had a few conversations. She took my tour, and she and her husband actually participated in an investigation with me
Oh, really?
at an 18th century manor house. And Norm is the one who is more interested in the scientific approach, and Cheryl is more the empathic and clairvoyant type.
Yeah. I can see that too.
Yeah. But I haven't spoken to them about this in, I don't know, I mean, not much, in a couple of years. We sort of like talked about it. I figured out where they're coming from. They figured out where I'm coming from. And that was sort of the end of the conversation.
Gotcha.
Not that there's any bad vibes. I love those guys. They're great people.
Yeah, I love them too. They're the best. I think the reason I asked just because I know that they're into kind of like the esoteric, the metaphysical, the occult, whatever, for lack of better terms, Wiccan practices. But I think there needs to be a certain level of a mesh between spirit and science. And like I said, you're clearly from a more scientific outlook.
It's just because I'm totally ungifted with paranormal abilities myself. If I was gifted, I might be approaching it in a different way.
Right.
But I think that anything that is real has to be made from something.
Right, yeah.
If it's a ghost, then it's got to be made from something. It may not be made from ordinary matter. It may be made from things like electric fields, highly cohesive electric fields, or something like ball lightning. You know, there's an example of something that is made only out of electric fields, and it's very real. Science is settled on whether or not ball lightning is real. But all it is electricity in a highly cohesive field. We don't understand it well enough to reproduce it consistently, and or study it in a laboratory. But there's enough evidence that science is satisfied that it's a real thing. Now, take something, but it wasn't always that way.
Right.
You know, scientists sort of poo-pooed the idea. Oh, you didn't really see ball lightning. It was something else. You know, you had too much to drink that night or something. But over the passage of time and people reporting things, a few photographs, some video evidence, science changed its mind. So I think if something is real, it must be made from something. And with the instruments that we have today and are probably going to develop, we'll be able to tell exactly when a ghost walks into the room, even if I don't have any paranormal abilities, any gifts, you know. So that's why I like science, because the scientific approach to this, because it produces data.
Yeah.
And I can share the data. I go into the place with a recorder and it makes a recording. It's a real sound. Whatever it is that it's recording is a real sound. And I can play that sound for other people and get their input on what it is. Whether it's the boards creaking or the wind blowing or my stomach growling, which happens a lot, or whether or not it is a real disembodied person, you know? So yeah, that's why I'm like into the science side.
That place that you were saying you've done for 7 years, that's the... You said what century manor is that?
It was built in 1750. The earliest part of the house was built in 1750.
That's the same place you've been going for 7 years that you took Cheryl and Norm to?
Yeah.
And that's the flea market?
It's the big house next to the flea market.
The big house. Why there so often? What's so special about it? Or is it just accessible?
Well, you yourself mentioned, we've been talking about how, like the anomalous magnetic fields at that place where the Manson family did its deeds,
Right.
Whether or not that influenced their behavior and whether or not it influences the fact that it's as haunted as it is. There's been a lot of chatter among paranormal investigators about the physical environment. Like, there will be two houses. Okay, there's two houses. One on this side of the road has got a reputation for being haunted. Full-bodied apparitions, things move, they fly through the air, people hear voices, all of it. Everything that a haunted house is supposed to be on. On the other side of the road, there'll be another house that is just as old and should have a ghost in it, but nobody hears a thing there. And they speculate, people like me speculate that it's the difference between those two locations has to do with like the minerals in the ground, the way it faces. You were talking about feng shui, that which direction the building is facing,
faces
you know,
west, faces east.
Whether it's on a hill, whether the wind blows across it or around it. Now, at this location by the flea market, what you have is a house on a hill facing basically east-west. The original name, the first name that the plantation house was called was Western View, because the front of the house originally faced to the west, and you'd see the sunset, and it was magnificent. Remember, there was no trees there; it was all fields. And it's also got water. There's two different creeks that run by it in two different directions. One runs to the north and joins Massaponax Creek, and the other one runs from east to west and joins that creek. So it's sitting on a little peninsula between these two moving water sources. And there are people that, and I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm open-minded about whether or not this is a factor, but there are people that say that proximity to moving water is a thing that adds energy. So across the street in the old house where nobody ever hears anything, it's got just as many ghosts, but they don't have access to the energy that is available to the people haunting this house because of the physical location and the things around it. That's what I was talking about, the water hole hypothesis. I think that the earth is basically covered with ghosts. And the reason we don't hear them all the time is because the places where the energy is available for them to manifest are few and far between.
Right.
Like oases in a desert.
Right.
So some of these houses, these 18th century or whatever house, you know, the hospitals and things that have the reputation for being haunted, they just happen to be built on the spot. That's special.
So, I guess the idea with the water is that it's a conductor. It's a conductor of energy.
There's all kinds of things like that. You know?
I've seen some weird things about water and spirituality of water. What do you think about people? Water having to do with the geometric or the geomagnetic. I've been saying geometric the whole time. God, I'm an idiot.
No.
The geomagnetic pull and stuff like that. Speaking of water, once again, didn't the Powhatan, the local Native Americans, believe that the Rappahannock River was cursed?
I don't know about that. I know that was the Rappahannock was in Powhatan's territory
Okay.
after the war he fought right before the Europeans came here. He had just concluded a war with some neighbors, and I think that part of the settlement included this, between the warring nations, included this area as under Powhatan's rule. But a Rappahannock means swiftly rising waters because of its tendency to flood very
Okay.
quickly. So as to whether or not there was some dark metaphysical, mystical association there, I don't know.
Maybe it was just cursed in the sense that it floods rapidly, and
You don't want to build your hut too close to the water, you know, to the bank.
You also don't want to swim in there either because of the undercurrents, the way the undercurrents are in there and stuff too.
It's a very dangerous river for as slow as that water moves.
So maybe that's the reason why they viewed it as cursed, is because
can
people
buy
would just
that.
swim in there and die because they get swept under in those weird spots. And to them, it was an anomaly because they didn't understand how undercurrents work and things of that nature.
Yeah, could be water spirits pulling people down.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Maybe it was.
There was a site I used to look at. It's called In5D, IN, then the number 5D. It's
Okay.
like in 5 dimension. But it's like a spiritual metaphysical site. But they would have stuff about water, and about being able to transmit energy or frequency and different things like that through water. I need to go back and look at some of the weirder stuff like that. But it's a conductor.
Sure.
So, if it can conduct energy that we can see,
Right.
then there's no reason it can't conduct energy that we can't see.
Right. Some form of energy that we haven't discovered yet.
Right. Maybe it's also an as above, so below thing. So if there is another literal plane stacked on top of this one that the ghosts are existing and that we can't see, that, well, wouldn't there also be a river flowing through this plane too? Would that make it more like a boat for the apparitions to guide through?
What if it's like this? We live in the physical world, and we have a physical river made of water. What if the other side, this other dimension, is sort of a mirror, and there is a river there that overlies our river, but it's not made from water, it's made from something else.
Right.
And the reason moving water triggers paranormal activity is because of turbulence between the two flows.
Huh, yeah.
So you've got, let's call it chi, a river of chi, and a river of water, and maybe they're moving in the same direction at the same speed, there wouldn't be any turbulence. But if one of them is moving faster than the other one, then there's going to be turbulence.
Or
And
if it's a mirror, it could be mirrored in the total sense to where one river is moving this way and one river is moving this way.
Right.
So they're literally going against each other's grain.
And then there would have to be turbulence all the time. There
Right.
never would be an instance where there wouldn't be turbulence between the two flows, moving in different directions. And maybe that turbulence is the source of the energy that the dead and other non-corporeal things can utilize to manifest.
Right.
I could believe that. I could see that as a reasonable hypothesis. Now, just figuring out how to detect that invisible river is a thing that would be the next step.
Right.
Because otherwise, I'm just going off on a tangent. But it certainly is interesting. There's so much more. Our visual acuity, the range of things that we can see from red to violet, a little bit into the ultraviolet, a little bit into the infrared, is just that much of the electromagnetic spectrum that is literally infinite. So with our own eyes, we have a very short-sighted view of the universe. If you could see what the night sky looks like with X-ray eyes, to see the X-rays coming in from space, it would look like a completely different map of the sky. There'd be places that are patches of the sky that would be bright, that are the darkest patches that you can see now with your normal eyes. So I think that so much of the universe is hidden from us because of our flesh, because of the way we've evolved or been designed, which is optimal for our environment to get us through life. But so much of the universe is hidden from us.
It's also hidden from us. So much of it is hidden from us too, because it would be overwhelming to have a knowledge of. And that even if you were given information, you still wouldn't have an understanding. So it would just leave you in a state of confusion,
right?
Or schizophrenia.
It's like trying to teach calculus to a chimpanzee or something.
Right.
Bounded rationality is the limits that we have on our IQ. Nobody has an infinite IQ.
Right.
But to really understand the universe, you probably would have to.
Yeah, because the universe is infinite.
Yeah.
You're true.
Likewise. Compliment accepted.
Yeah, right. So, is there any other hot spots you're saying that places that you go there a lot because of the water, and that a lot of paranormal investigators go there? That manor?
That building has fairly consistent activity.
Okay.
The battlefield, I got into the paranormal to try and debunk it.
Right.
I was watching the same ghost-oriented shows as everybody else, like 10 years ago. And I can almost tell you exactly which episode it was that pulled the trigger on me. It was ghost hunters. They went to some hotel, I think, in New Hampshire. And there was a dead lady whose nickname was Princess. So they walk into this room, and they say, "Princess, are you here? Can you hear us?" And a woman's voice out of nowhere says, "I can hear you. Can you hear me?" Just as plain as day. And I was like, it cannot be that easy. It cannot be that easy. If it was that easy, everybody would do it. And nobody would have any doubts about the paranormal, about ghosts, about the afterlife. We would all know. So I said, where around here am I going to run into a ghost? If I want to test this hypothesis, what's the highest probability?
Oh, the battlefields.
Right. So I go down to the battlefield, the Fredericksburg battlefield, near the end of Lee Drive, where that pyramid is. The Meade Pyramid.
Yeah.
I'm walking through the woods with my digital audio recorder, asking questions like, what's your rank? When did you die? How do you feel about war? Which side did you fight for? Feeling like an absolute idiot and praying nobody saw me. See this madman walking in the woods, talking to the trees, asking the trees, what's their rank? And I said, I'm going to get home and I'm going to listen to this recording, and there's not going to be anything on it except birds chirping and wind blowing and the sound of traffic on the dogs barking, that kind of stuff. I got home and I hear myself ask the question, what's your rank? Lieutenant. When did you die? December 1862. It was a life. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, remembering it. And I was like, oh my God, this is real. This is all real. It's all real.
Right.
And, oh God, I'm getting goosebumps. Is there a ghost in here? But after that, I refined my technique. But the battlefield is a good place to go looking. Just be respectful. Whenever I go on investigations, I consider some of these people have been dead for hundreds of years.
Right.
You're not just talking about an accident victim who died yesterday.
Yeah.
You can encounter them as well. Some of these people have been dead for hundreds of years. They were dead before George Washington was born. So in every possible way, I consider them my elders and worthy of my respect. And so that's how I interact with them.
Yeah.
I don't do like Mr. Bagans does, and it's like dare them to manifest, provoke them,
Right.
confront them.
Right.
That's just rude. And even if it works, somebody's, a tourist is going to go through there tomorrow and have to deal with an angry ghost. So, everybody appreciates nice manners.
You were talking about how you think that, talking about all the variables that go into making a place haunted, and water and stuff like that. You're saying that soil, certain minerals? You think
People say
things-
quartz. I don't have an opinion on
Quartz.
whether or not quartz is important.
Yeah.
But the general consensus when I've asked other people is that, oh, well, you should have seen the amount of quartz that this place was off the charts haunted. It was just quartz laying all over the ground. The Stafford, I don't know if it's still in the same location, but the SPCA building in Stafford County, I've not investigated there. But I've got a lot of colleagues who have, and some of them have left the building
Really?
because they couldn't take it.
Because it's violently haunted.
Scratches, bruises,
Oh, wow.
all of it.
Um,
And that was what they said about the place. It's like there's quartz laying all over the ground. So maybe.
so the pyramids were topped with quartz.
White limestone. They're built out
White
of sand.
limestone.
Yeah, they're built out of the core of the pyramids. Most of them, the pyramid of Menkaure is the only one that still has some of that white limestone casing on the top.
Okay.
All the pyramids used to be blinding white because they were encased in this white limestone. But over the centuries, that stuff got dismantled to be used in the building of mosques and churches and other buildings. Cairo is full of all the white buildings that you see are probably made from pyramid stone. But yes, there's quartz in all of it. Sand is just quartz, and the core of those buildings was made from sandstone. Or Tour limestone? Tour limestone? No, not Tour limestone. That's Italy. Never mind.
But quartz is supposed to be like a magnifier, help induce energy, help boost it.
That's very well established. That's why your watch has got a quartz element in it,
Okay.
because when you run electric current through quartz, it vibrates,
Okay.
and it vibrates in a predictable way, and predictable enough that you can make a really accurate timepiece by counting how many vibrations it does, and that's the fundamental basis of a quartz movement in a clock. And it's piezoelectric, which means that not only will it vibrate when you run a current across it, but if you squeeze it, if you compress it, it generates electricity.
Okay.
It generates actual measurable electricity. You can put a meter on it and measure the electricity coming off of it. And
So that's got to definitely have an effect on the paranormal, or
if quartz has an effect on the paranormal, I would not be surprised at all, because it has other demonstrable effects that we can measure without even talking about the paranormal.
right.
So much of our science depends on it.
I did not know that so much of our science depended on quartz, like you, in the way that you explained it. So that's interesting.
Some of the first radios, crystal radios, they operated on a quartz crystal. It took the radio waves, converted them to electricity, and then you'd have to listen to an earphone. There was no batteries. They weren't battery powered or amplified in any way. They produced very tiny currents, but and gradually that technology got replaced. But even the technology that immediately replaced it still used crystals of some kind, germanium, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, crystals are a big deal, even outside of the paranormal.
And metaphysical and stuff.
Yeah, you know.
So why wouldn't so? With that being said, why, if they're such a part of the practical, why wouldn't they be?
Well, you're asking the fundamental question. Here's this thing right here, and it has a physical presence, and I know what its physical properties are. We're talking about a quartz crystal. It has physical properties, and we can measure them, and we can experiment with them. And we don't know to what degree that object has metaphysical properties, or properties that you and I would call paranormal, because we don't understand it the way Newton didn't understand the force of gravity,
Right.
what gravity was. So maybe this microphone has got some paranormal properties. Maybe the metal in it or the plastic in it. I mean, think about it. The plastic is made from oil, right? What was oil? Before it was oil, it was life. It's the decomposed and composted remains of countless millions of marine organisms, right?
Right.
And so that's why it's called a fossil fuel.
Right.
And when you polymerize it and turn it into something, you get plastic. So this thing is descended from life. At least the insulation, this rubber or plastic insulation on this wire here, is descended millions of years ago. This was alive. The stuff this is made from was alive. So if there is a paranormal aspect to life, Maybe there's a paranormal aspect to everything that is made from plastic. Maybe, burning fossil fuels in your car has a paranormal consequence. Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe it's all speculation.
It's
And
all
this
as-
whole podcast has been pseudoscience.
This is me talking off the top of my
And
head.
tomorrow they're going to put us in a loony bin.
It's probably coming.
Yeah. They have rooms at Snowden for us.
So long as I have access to my tools.
Yeah. So what is a couple more topics before we end this up. What do you think is the most haunted place in Fredericksburg? What's the most haunted that you've been to, and what do you think is the most haunted?
Well, because I spent so much time at the Manor by the flea market, in my opinion, it's in a class by itself. But the battlefield all the battlefields around here are pretty haunted. And as far as downtown, on Caroline Street, there are some antique stores.
Yeah, I love the antique stores.
And I've gotten some amazing results. Not even on a formal investigation, I'll be upstairs in an antique store and I'll hear footsteps. And so I'll whip out my audio recorder and start my Magnetometer app and do an impromptu investigation and get amazing results. When things have been standing in one place for a long time, that also seems to have an effect. And Fredericksburg saw so much bloodshed during the war between the states. There were bodies piled up in the streets, and some of those buildings were used as hospitals and morgues. There's lots of opportunities. When you think about what some people say it takes to make a ghost, you don't just die peacefully in your sleep and become a ghost. You have to die some dramatic, scary, terrifying way, or in a rage or something like that. Then you become a ghost. I don't know if that's true or not, but
like you have to have a certain amount of adrenaline pumping to become a ghost.
Mm-hmm. Especially, so the saying goes, with residual hauntings, where the haunting is not an actual intelligent thing that you can talk to. It just goes through it repeats the cycle. But usually the last thing that happened to it when it was alive.
Right.
But anywhere downtown is probably very haunted. It's hard for me to answer that question in a sensible way, because wherever I've gone looking for ghosts with a digital audio recorder, which is my number one favorite tool, because that gives you information, because they'll answer questions sometimes. I have not come away without something. I will say that there are a few places that I don't see too much activity when I've gone investigating. There is a house sort of to the end of Caroline Street on the other side of the railroad tracks. I don't have permission to talk about the address or who lives there, but I did an investigation there because the place's reputation for being haunted. People have seen full bodied apparitions there. And I came back with a few murmurs on my recording, and I was there for like 6 hours. But I didn't hear a single word that was intelligible, and that's unusual. Food for thought there.
So you think do you think the investigator has a variable in it too? Like you said, some people are more inclined to paranormal activity?
I think that's definitely true. There was one incident at the Manor where we had a guest. And when it was our turn, at the end of our tour, we give the guests a 15-minute opportunity to ask their own questions of the ghosts while we were recording. And then we immediately retire and listen to the recordings. And every single one of her questions got answered. And when we were listening to it, it became obvious that every single one of her questions got answered. So I started the recorder again, and we started asking more questions, and every single one of her other questions got answered. In what was supposed to be the epilogue of the evening. And we even got to the point where we were asking for lottery numbers. Do you know what happened?
What?
We got lottery numbers.
Huh.
From the other side. We got a string of numbers. I played them for like 2 weeks and didn't win a thing. So maybe they were lottery numbers from 1930 or something.
Right. Or maybe they were mirrored in some way.
Could be. Or maybe they were just like, let's play with him.
That's something I was going to say about the antique shops. getting readings there. It probably doesn't just have to do with Fredericksburg and downtown, but all the old objects there. It's just, and like you said, they've been, a lot of them, not just the buildings that's been sitting there forever, but the objects have been sitting in these buildings for extended periods of time.
Well,
While you see a lot of old mirrors, a lot of old Victorian mirrors and stuff like that in antique shops too. So I wonder if that, I mean,
there is a lot of evidence that seems to strongly suggest that ghosts have a problem with mirrors. It's kind of like flypaper. And on my own investigations, I've heard them complain about being stuck in the mirror. And one of the last times I did an investigation at the manor, we got some very interesting photographic evidence from just taking pictures of mirrors.
really,
Faces staring back at you. And where there was nobody to cast a reflection.
right.
And so, yeah, but the thing that we're talking about, though, when you talk about how the antique shops are full of these old objects, some people believe that a spirit can become attached to an object. And I can understand how that could happen. You know, it was a wedding gift that you received, you know, and that was your favorite thing. That dresser was your favorite thing. And then you died. And all your stuff was sent away. Where are you going to go? Either you're going to haunt the place that you loved, or you're going to gravitate towards your favorite thing. And if the dresser was your favorite thing, then you'll follow that dresser around all over the country, if you're able to, because of the associations and the warm feelings it gives you when you look at that dresser and you remember the day you got it and all the history, and, you know, you used to put your baby's things in the bottom drawer. Those kinds of things mean things to people. And a lot of your personality survives the transition from this world to the next. So if you're nice, if you're sentimental in this world, you will be in the next. If you're a jerk in this world, you will be in the next. I've encountered those as well. So yeah, the fact that antique shops are full of these things, maybe 1 out of 100 has some kind of a thing attached to it, a person attached to it. But it happens.
Yeah, yeah. I love antique shops too, by the way. I love those.
The vibe of the place.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it's like being in a museum.
Where you get
that
to buy the
can touch.
exhibits. Yeah, you get to buy the
Yeah,
exhibits.
exactly.
That's
You get to
exactly
buy
how I
them.
feel about it.
I love them. I actually wrote an article about the antique stores downtown Fredericksburg. I encourage everybody to go to the antique stores, and God, it's one of my favorite. And then it's like all the times that I've been to them, I still haven't seen everything. It's almost impossible to digest every little knick-knack and thing that there is in there.
And it's not static. It's the inventory is changing constantly.
Right? Yeah.
People
yeah.
buy stuff, and the vendor buys more stuff, and they put it for sale. It's
Yep.
new things every other month.
Yep. Yep.
Or new old things.
Yeah. New old things.
Yeah.
Old new.
New
things.
to us.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So I've told you that I moved out of the lodge. I moved into a new place. I actually lived there before, back in like 2010, 2011. I lived there once before. My father's actually lived there, and now I'm living there again. So before, when I lived there back in 2010, this is in my younger days when having parties a lot, having a lot of people over, and the girls, specifically the females, would always talk about and tell me about the ghost in the house, that there was a ghost. And have you seen the ghost? Have you seen the woman in the house? And
It's a female.
It's a female, yeah. I think my father said he's seen her before too. The woman that lives there now with us, lives downstairs, she's seen her. A gentleman came over last week and had never been there before and was like, y'all got a spirit in this house. So it seems very glaringly apparent that there is a ghost in my house. I haven't seen it.
Have you heard anything?
I haven't experienced anything myself.
Okay.
Maybe I'm under some sort of protection, maybe not. My roommate from the motel, who's living in the room across from me now, Brian, you know Brian. He said the other night, we have like the way our doors are, it has like an old lock on top of it, or like an old doorknob on top of it, but there's still like a bar sticking through or something,
Right.
like poking through a rod still poking through. The other night he said that he could literally like see it move, like someone pushed it.
So are we talking about like a slide latch? It
Yes.
moves left to right?
No, it comes in and out.
Okay.
So it's like something had pushed it out of his door, or like pulled it back in, and I didn't do that to him. So he's seen something recently too. Actually, Brian actually projected the other day too. Yeah, it's kind of jealous
I would love to talk to him about what his experience was.
because he's he's a lot more conservative and practical when it comes to these matters than I am. You know, as you can see, I'm very liberal, impractical, speculative,
Open-minded.
open-minded.
You have to be open-minded, and I think you are.
And Brian's a little bit more just conservative when it comes to looking at these things. So it's strange that the universe, for lack of a better term, you know, wants to, I mean, there's other terms, I'm just going to call it the universe, but that it wants to,
Make its presence known?
right, to him. I found that interesting. But that's off topic, and that could have something to do with the house. If the house has a certain energy or something, maybe that could have an effect on his dreams and help him astrally project or connect to a celestial state or whatever. But yeah, I need you to come over and do some sort of investigation or something, man.
I'd be more than happy to.
It's an older house. It's out towards Spotsy Courthouse. I'm near Courthouse Road Elementary, actually.
Okay.
And like I said, it's an older house. It's been there since before the 60s. But yeah, apparently there was a woman in the nightgown but everyone that's seen her has, they've never reported any like malicious intent or that there was like any malevolence. Right, that's
just a dead lady going about her business.
Right. That there was never like that seeing her didn't invoke fear naturally in itself, and that she herself wasn't trying to instill fear in anyone. And then another thing too is she's mostly seen in specifically this one room, which is kind of like it's like an in-between room. There's like a bathroom coming off of it. It connects to the living room and it connects to the kitchen. And so it's kind of like just a...
Almost a passageway.
Yeah, almost a passage. That's another thing. It's got 4 passageways. It's got the bathroom, one from the 2 from the kitchen, right? One from this side, one from this side. Bathroom here, and then the passageway going into the living room.
Well, what it
Something
sounds
about doors and
it sounds to me like what you're describing is that people are seeing this apparition in the place where people walk anyway, which you would expect. You might see one in a room somewhere, but if you can't get from one side of the house to the other without going through this place, then if there is a ghost that died in the house and the floor plan hasn't changed, then she's going to keep going the way she did.
right.
If she's in her mind, she's cleaning the bathroom mirror. Now she's finished, it's time to wash the dishes. So she goes out the bathroom and goes towards the kitchen. And that seems to be like where people are seeing her, is in the place that she would cross multiple times in life. And she's still doing it. And that's a common thing for the dead to do.
Okay.
To go about their life. Because in my own house,
and they're manifesting in the place that they're going through the most, right? She's intersecting through this one point the most in all her walks. So
Yes.
maybe that's
she just happens to be there more often than she is any other place.
right.
Because that's the one place she has to cross.
Right.
And that's the one place where you all have to cross who live in the house today. So you're going to intersect sometimes. But my house is haunted. And it's haunted enough. I'm not scared of ghosts. I got over that a long time ago. I still have a startled response. If they grab me, I'm going to jump, which does happen. But I'm used to the ghosts. I'm used to dead people being around. But at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm trying to sleep, I don't need to hear people walking up and down my hallway. So that's a problem at my house. And so I keep the fan on to turn the volume down on what's coming from the hallway sometimes. But I did ask, why are you walking up and down? Why are you walking all over the house at night? And the answer was, I'm remembering. Now think about that. All the things that are ever going to happen to those people in terms of life events are behind them. They're not going to have any more babies. They're not going to get married. They've already died. All the things that can happen to a person already have happened to these people. So what do they have? They have their memories, to the extent that they're able. And so, this lady in your house, she's not just doing chores. She's going to the place where they had that great birthday that year. And she's going into the room where, she saw her daughter get proposed to by her boyfriend.
Right.
And those memories, and this was my daughter's bedroom, and she's standing there and she's thinking about her daughter as a baby and when she was playing and learning to read, all those special things she's remembering. And I think that is what's motivating a lot of the hauntings that we do encounter. It's not just people who died horribly. Anybody can become a ghost.
Right.
But, and so they are just, sometimes they're going about their daily routine, just still doing it. And sometimes they're reminiscing. Why is the ghost up at 3 o'clock in the morning? She's not washing dishes.
That seems to be a spike in paranormal too. Is 3 o'clock in the morning, the witching hour. I actually read an article not too long ago. The scientific explanation for it was that our melanin, right? Is it melanin or melatonin? Melanin is what
gives your skin pigment.
Okay, so the melatonin levels. That's when your brain is like boosting them or something, or redoing them. So maybe that's what causes some of the dreaminess that you experience at 3 o'clock in the morning if you're awake. It's because your body thinks it's supposed to be asleep right now, so it's causing a sort of delirium.
I'm sure that there is a component there that would be explained by that.
Yeah.
I think also, people like to do ghost hunts and ghost paranormal investigations at night.
Yeah.
And it's not because the activity is necessarily higher. I mean, that may be what they think. I think that some of it is our perception as well. Throughout the day, the neighborhood is full of noises. People are coming home from work, the next door neighbor is cooking, the lady across the street is yelling at her kids, and any noises that the dead are making fall below the threshold of our noticing. But at 3 o'clock in the morning, hopefully the lady is not yelling at her kid, and the couple next door is not having a fight, and it's quiet. And so if the dead do make a sound, there's a higher probability that you will notice it. Yeah, you will notice it.
One of my theories with kind of the paranormal at nighttime is that, all right, William Blake said, when the doors of perception are cleansed, things will appear to man as they truly are, infinite. And when it's night, typically, especially when you're in all darkness, it looks infinite, even though everything is still there. If this room became pitch black right now,
you wouldn't be able to see where the walls were.
Right, exactly.
For all you know, that part of your subconscious is in an infinite space.
Exactly. So that in itself lifts a certain veil for your consciousness, like you said, and makes it more easily. It's like pulling back a curtain.
It's like you're more tuned in.
Yeah.
You're more tuned in.
Yeah.
And it's, maybe it's brain chemistry, and maybe it's the environment that's just completely independent of brain chemistry. And maybe it really is a case of paranormal activity peaking at 3 o'clock, between 3 and 4 in the morning. I'll tell you, over at the Manor, one of the tricks that we did, I say trick, but one of the techniques we used was to leave a recorder running overnight. The proprietor of the antique store, she would close up at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd start the recorder. You can hear her closing the door and locking it. There's no live person in that building. And the next time a live person came into the building was when she opened it back up the next morning. You'd hear the keys come in, you'd hear the door open. And I would listen to it. It was to produce a 12-hour recording. And I had to listen to this. So I'm listening to hours and hours of sometimes a noise. But then, after midnight, that bell curve that I was talking about, where it increases in amplitude, the amount of activity until it tapers off, it peaks between 3 and 4 in the morning. So there is something else going on besides just different perception and brain chemistry, because that is just a recorder.
Yeah.
There's no person. There's no live person in the building. I'm not there. Just the recorder is running. But you hear them talking. You hear them talking to each other. You hear them moving furniture around. And it peaks between 3 and 4 in the morning. So, yeah, there's something else going on. But I've also been in that building between 3 and 4 in the morning and heard nothing.
Right. It's like a veil lifts or something. Really.
Yeah.
That's
or the energy becomes more available.
Right. Because of... I think another thing that I saw, too, had to do with, like, people praying. Right? So the idea was that between 3 or 4 in the morning is witching hour because everybody's gone to bed. It's between the times when people have gone to sleep and people are waking up. So there's nobody less people are actively praying during those hours. And because of that, evil spirits are able to gain entry.
That's interesting. I think I have a lot of friends who would probably agree with that.
Something about going back to the ghost at the house. So I was wondering, you kind of, without going there yet, diagnosed it as, okay, it seems like she is of the house. That's her territory, and she's just kind of going through her old motions and whatever.
It's just a feeling. It's a possibility that I think is highly probable.
But my theory has been that seeing her in that room because of something in that room.
Okay.
And there's like an old piano in that room. There's an old grandfather clock. And then there is like 3 or 4 dream catchers. And I think dream catchers are very special in that they have an association with the afterlife, the next plane, whatever you want to call it, the paranormal.
Well, the Native Americans certainly seem to think so. Thousands of years of them, right?
Yeah.
So there's probably something to it.
And then, the way that they're designed is like a sacred geometry, flower of life design.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Kind of like a mandala.
Right, yeah. Which is, once again, it's of all the weird, esoteric, trippy shit that I'm into, new age, whatever you want to call it. Let's get some crystals and burn some sage. But, I think she has something to do with the dream catchers, and also could just because I have an aversion to dream catchers since when I lived at my grandfather's house years ago. One of my most alarming instances or encounters with paranormal was I was laying in bed one night. I had a dream catcher, so I'm laying in. Eric, do you have a tack around here somewhere?
Tack?
Yeah, a thumbtack.
Yeah.
You know what? I could just use this as an example. I could use this. So I'm laying in bed, and there's a shelf above my bed, right?
Okay.
And in the shelf, there's like a tack in.
Okay.
But it's not pushed in all the way to where the head of the tack is touching the shelf.
Right. So there's space.
There's still some space here between the shelf and the head of the tack, right? So it's sitting behind this lip on the metal.
Okay.
So I'm laying in bed, and I hear... First of all, there's nothing up there that's could have fallen from any distance that would make that loud of a bang. Nothing that heavy. Mm-hmm. I open my eyes to that noise, and my dream catcher is falling next to my face. Like the feather from Forrest Gump. Uh-huh. Right? It falls and lands on the pillow right next to my face. I get up alarmed and look at my shelf. Nothing else has been adjusted or moved. Just that dream catcher. And for it to come off, the tack is still in. It would have to come and then jump over the lip. Yeah. So in my mind, it's something fucking ripped that thing off. It did not like me. It did not want me to have that dream catcher.
Huh. Somebody was sending you a message of some kind.
Yeah. That I needed to have my dreams, or it didn't want that dream catcher there anymore, so it could, or it was almost like an evil spirit tried to come, and the dream catcher, worked as a magnet or whatever it does for spirits, and the spirit hit it so hard that the impact, knocked it off or something.
Sure, I can imagine that happening. I don't know too much about the actual Native American lore behind the dream catchers. I know what, like, tourist pamphlets and the promotional stuff say about it. If you're playing this over your bed, then it catches the bad dreams. Right. Now, whether that's what they used it for or something else. But if all of these material objects have some paranormal property, consider the properties, consider the materials that go into the construction of a dream catcher. In your house where you live now, what if those dream catchers on the wall, you said there's more than one of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if they are acting like barriers? Maybe she would like to go. But the dream catchers, because of some paranormal property about the geometry of the thing, or the materials they're made from, are keeping her there.
Right.
It's just a hypothesis.
There could be truth to that.
You could go and ask her.
Or what if they could be working as a reverse portal? So instead of working as a vacuum to pull in spirits, it's working as a blower to push out spirits.
Possibly.
Damn Indian threaded my fucking dream catcher backwards, and now I got a portal instead of a dream catcher.
Oh, that would be
classic mistake. We've all been there. We've all been there.
I can see how that could be a problem.
It would be a major problem. Maybe I need to download one of those apps, and
Sure.
maybe I could borrow your recorder, or you can come over. You're more than welcome to come over.
I've got like 5 recorders.
We get some absinthe. Even though last time I drank absinthe, I got blackout drunk and couldn't remember anything. I had to be told the next day what I said and did. I was like, oh,
I remember there was a chandelier hanging over that table, and all of a sudden the absinthe hit both of us at the same time, and we were like, oh. You're like,
That was
because it just, absinthe just turns up the volume on colors and things a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not really powerfully psychoactive. We got that drunk that night because we were drinking that much.
Yeah, and we were drinking.
And we could have
a lot,
drunk
too.
anything and got that drunk.
Yeah,
but
and the mixture, because we were drinking mead and
yeah.
something else too.
We poured all kinds of stuff on top of each other that you probably shouldn't.
All sorts of shitstorm.
Yep. Oh man, but I like to say that Van Gogh wasn't crazy. He was an absinthe drinker. He was just painting what he saw.
Yeah.
Starry Night. You can see you hit just the right amount of absinthe in the right amount of time, and you can walk outside and you're like, yeah, I dig.
I dig.
I can see where that comes from.
I know you're not big into psychedelics. I don't know how much you know about dimethyltryptamine, DMT.
Just the shit you sent me, man.
Yeah, ayahuasca.
Messenger.
I actually smoked some DMT again not too long ago, a couple weeks back. And one of the weird things that it did, effects that it had on my vision, was that it was like it dropped the barrier between space. Like I said, the William Blake, once again, when the doors of perception are cleansed, things will appear to man as they truly are, infinite. Mm-hmm. And, part of that idea is that we're all one. The universe is one big quilt. These
so
two,
it makes you feel connected.
But when I smoked the DMT, it literally dropped there was no more depth perception between objects, and it was like you were looking at something as, my friend was also the brick wall behind him and the tree that was just, this much closer. And they were all kind of one thing. And he had a third eye and weird esoteric.
See, that's a really good reason for me not to try it. That's a good reason for me not to try it. I'm not looking forward to an experience like that.
What do you think about mushrooms? I mean, religions and cultures all over the world for eons have been eating psychedelic mushrooms. And DMT and psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in psychedelic mushrooms, are only like one molecule off in their chemical chains. If I showed you a picture of their chemical chains, there's only one.
And mescaline.
They're only one off. Mescaline as well. So, I love that kid. So I don't know. I just wonder if there's, and that's that infinite. That's another thing that brings me back to the darkness, and I don't know. It's a lifting of the veil. It's a showing you the infinites, and then it kind of all comes back. I think what it is that everything is infinite and connected, and that our perception for this mortal soul and existence has to create depth and separation in order to keep us from going insane. Because if I would have had to try to operate, if I got stuck like that for the rest of my life, it would have been difficult to operate. It would have taken a little while to get used to.
Having never experienced something to that degree, I cannot imagine. So I'll have to take your word for it. But
it's very dreamy. Sorry, the reason I brought that up though too. Sorry, is because you were talking about the absinthe and how it brightens the colors, and that was one of the immediate onsets of the DMT was that it was like I just had my eyeballs cleaned and I was seeing color for the first time. And it was the natural world, but it was just way more colorful than it had ever been. Sorry to cut you off. What were you about to say, but
I get what you're saying, and people have been using chemical means to alter their consciousness and get in touch with like different realms for 10,000, 20,000 years.
yeah,
Not every time, but there have been instances where archaeologists have uncovered drug kits, from a shaman or something, and they include the usual ingredients. There's some cannabis, there's some kind of psychoactive hallucinogen, a mushroom or some other plant, and if you look at the religious texts of ancient India, the Vedas, they had a drink called soma.
Yeah, soma.
That did the same thing. The Brahmins would imbibe this stuff, and they'd go on to a different plane of existence where they would communicate with their gods, and come back and then dictate it and stuff. That stuff wasn't written down for thousands of years, though. It was passed on orally, but so there's every culture, if you go far enough back, has had an experience with using these natural pharmaceuticals to expand their consciousness. But the question that I've always had was, if it takes a chemical to expand your consciousness, how authentic is it?
Right.
There are other guys who through transcendental meditation, they don't touch anything, no chemical, and they will still feel that their consciousness has been expanded.
Yeah,
they have
transcending.
They're now enlightened, or more enlightened than they were, and they report the same things, feeling connected. They see the connections, how everything is connected to everything else, which I would accept as an axiom. I think everything is connected to everything else. It's just something that I intuit. I just kind of know that it is without having to see for myself.
Right.
So yeah, I think that but think about this. If it's real, if this being able to perceive the wider universe experience is authentic, then if there is a ghost in the room, is there a drug you could take that would make you see it when everybody else doesn't?
I've never thought about that.
I've never heard of anybody reporting an incident like that. Where it's like, oh my God, there's a ghost over there, and nobody else is high, and so they don't see it. But then, the ghost manifests in some way that everybody knows that the dude is right. There really is a ghost over there. That would be an interesting experiment to do.
Would be interesting.
I'm not going to take it.
Yeah. And even if you were, I would never ask you to admit that on my podcast.
I just don't want to get in trouble.
No, yeah, that's totally fine.
If some of this stuff was legal, I might.
Like if mushrooms became legal.
Yeah. I feel like almost the only thing I got going for me, man, is my mind, and I don't want to pull a trigger on something that's gonna have an avalanche effect on me, and I wig out.
Right.
I need things to keep working the way they are.
Like
at least as good as they are.
I like
Hopefully
how you
better.
said the avalanche effect, because in one of the documentaries that I watched about psychedelics recently, they compared the use of psychedelics to like a fresh coat of snow. That what it is your brain. That it's good for like helping alcoholics, people with anger issues, or certain neuroses. to take psychedelics because your brain gets so in these patterns, and every time and every day that it goes through these patterns, it just digs
Reinforces it.
right, and it digs the track deeper, and it works like sledding on a hill. And every time you do it, it just digs into the snow more and more and more until you're running into mud. But then when you take psychedelics, that it's like a fresh coat of snow, and that with that you can help try to plot new patterns. And like you said, you shouldn't need to do drugs to create new habits for yourself. But it is certainly nice to have a cheat code or something, if you can use it.
A cheat code.
Use it. Yeah,
it's a really good way of putting it. Well, I think that the use of psychedelics has a legitimate medical and psychiatric use, and
outside of all the esoteric
right.
and weird stuff, I do too.
Although we would never do this experiment, there have been a few cases over the years where people have taken like 100 times the dose of LSD that they're supposed to. And after they've recovered, they can become deathly ill.
They become violently ill.
And
I read an article about this the
just
other day too.
rolling their eyes up in their head, kind of out of it, throwing up.
Shitting blood, all that stuff.
But when they get over it, sometimes their clinical depression is also gone permanently.
Or they're bipolar.
Right. It's like cases from the 1960s and the early 1970s where people take 5, 10, 100 times as much of LSD as they're supposed to, of what their usual recreational dose is, whatever that is. Right. And it has some lasting and beneficial effect on their psychology, on their psychiatric condition. And there's lots of anecdotal evidence that scientists are starting to pick up now and doing clinical studies of like microdosing, to manage things like anger management.
Right.
You must have read some of these articles too.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Paul Stamets? He's a mycologist, and he's been on Joe Rogan Experience a couple of times. One of his anecdotal evidences is when he was younger, he had a really bad stutter. And then, for years he had a really bad stutter. Like he couldn't talk to, pretty girls and stuff like that. He just had like a horrible stutter. Well, he had this profound mushroom experience where he took however many grams of mushrooms. I think it was like 12 or 15, which is like, Terrence McKenna recommended 5 grams of dried mushrooms. So 15 is, and that's for a heroic dose. Like if I wanted to take mushrooms to trip and have a good time and like even get a little weird and spiritual, I would eat 3.5 grams. So 15 grams that's a lot. And then he climbed this tree and was like in a tree during a rainstorm or something, but he kept talking to himself and repeating to himself, I will not stutter. And he kept telling this to himself, and after his mushroom experience and going through this exercise, that he no longer had a stutter. And I watched a podcast with him, and he speaks very fluently, very intelligible.
His name is Paul Stamets?
Paul Stamets, yes.
I know Paul Stamets, but he's a fictional character from Star Trek Discovery, and he's a mycologist.
Really?
I wonder if that character is based on the guy you're talking about.
I wonder.
But, if you are interested in mushrooms and, the fungal aspect of enlightenment, there's some interesting episodes of that show.
Okay.
He's an astromycologist, and Paul Stamets, the astromycologist in the show, has discovered that all life in the universe, and not just this universe, but all the parallel universes, is connected through a web of basically space fungus that exists in a discrete subspace domain, is the way he puts it. So you don't see it, you don't see the connections, but it's there. And if you have the right equipment, you could see this equipment in the show. But that just amazes me that there's an actual dude named Paul Stamets.
He's a really interesting fellow too. He has, I think he like publishes a magazine as well that's about mycology, and it's not just about psychedelic mushrooms. I mean, he's a mycologist in the full sense.
Yeah.
So one of the things that he's kind of pushing right now is, I think it's Reiki mushrooms, that if you take the mycelium from Reiki mushrooms and add it to, supplement it to water for bees that it will help almost double their lifespan.
Really?
Yeah, because the mycelium supplement in the water helps their immune system. It makes them stronger. So it can help double their lifespan, which, I mean, fuck, bees are going extinct. So that's a really important thing. I mean, mushrooms could literally save the world. And it's not psychedelic mushrooms. So it's not... I'm not into mushrooms just for hippie shit.
Right.
I wouldn't want to grow them to eat. I love eating like regular mushrooms. That's a good food source.
Yeah.
There's another thing, but another thing that he likes to talk about, and I mean that I like to research and read about too, is psychedelic mushroom research with people with depression and anxiety and stuff like that. They've been doing things at Johns Hopkins, I believe, clinical trials. So it's getting less taboo. It's getting more accepted.
I think it's going to follow the path that marijuana has followed.
And MDMA is another one too that they're starting to do clinical trials with people with depression. I actually think it's legalized in California and different places for like therapy. That's MDMA is like the main ingredient in ecstasy. But they're using that for people with like depression and stuff like that. Is anybody in here?
No.
None of my podcast guys are in here. I want to wrap up in a second, and I don't want to look stupid when I go to wrap up. Where the fuck do I go, Eric? Oh. Now I look stupid not going to wrap up. Hello? Do you know what time it is, Patrick? I'm gonna wrap up. My phone's off. About to wrap up, Eric. Sorry, bud.
It's all good.
So sorry to be so abrupt, Patrick.
7:53.
Okay, so we've been going at it for a little over 2 hours now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we started about a little bit before 6. I know where to find you myself, because I can personally hit you up. How can people who want investigations done that aren't me contact you outside of Facebook? Your Spook Group is the name of your company, right?
Well, it's not really a company. It's going to be. But think of the Spook Group as like an institute for paranormal studies. And it's not just about ghosts. It's about anything. I can find out to what degree you are telepathic. There's a test for it. Those kinds of things also interest me. The whole ESP, psychic stuff. And they're simple tests. But if somebody is interested in the paranormal, any aspect of it, except maybe Bigfoot and flying saucers, then you can find the Spook Group on Facebook, and you can post a message there, ask to join. I will see the request, and unless you're clearly a negative type of person, then I have no problem approving anybody's request to join. But it's sort of the clearinghouse. I don't publish all the stuff that I've discovered. I don't publish all of my evidence that I've collected, but when I choose to, that's the first place I go. So
Okay.
You'll see videos of me ghost hunting, and you'll see videos of me and my daughter, who is 6, and she is growing up to be a good first-class investigator herself. She's already not scared of ghosts anymore. She's just scared of the dark.
I get that. I used to be scared of the dark as a kid.
Who wasn't?
Still am sometimes. We fear what we don't know, what we don't understand. So that's how people can find you to join in with kind of the Institute of Spook Group and kind of how do people contact you to get, like, if Eric's house is haunted, well, bad example, he can just talk to you after the podcast. But if he couldn't, and his house was haunted and he wanted you to come, give you a monetary to investigate.
Well, first of all, I welcome the opportunity to investigate as a new opportunity to gather evidence. So nobody's going to ever pay me. I don't accept money for doing an investigation in somebody's house. But if somebody tells me that they have a problem and it's bothering them, they don't know what it is that's going bump in the night, then as long as they don't come across as like a flake or something, then I will go do it for free, just for and gratefully do so, for the opportunity to collect more evidence. But if you were trying to find me, the best way is to find me on Facebook. I don't give out my phone number or anything else.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So Spook Group or Patrick Bishop on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll help free investigations. Nobody take advantage of that. No crackpots, no schemers.
Well, usually what's going to happen is if you've got a problem in your house, I will tell you to do a few things first. And you will tell me how that worked out. And what was the effect of that experiment. And then I will decide whether or not something more, if boots need to be on the ground.
Right.
And the Spook Group it's not a team. You know, we think of paranormal teams. It's not a team. It's a pool of investigators. And I'm going to be like, okay, so we've got a house that needs an investigation in Caroline County, and the family is willing to let us in from these dates to these dates. Who can come? And from our pool of researchers, we'll assemble an ad hoc temporary team, and we'll go in, we'll do our thing, be very professional about it, then we'll come back and review the evidence, and if there's anything important that we find, we'll share that with the people who invited us.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this podcast opens a couple more doors for you to more opportunities, more evidence, more data to look at, to compare and contrast.
That's the important thing.
Yeah.
I want data. If you want somebody to scare the ghosts out of your house, I'm not your guy.
Okay.
I think that the dead have as much right to be in a place as the rest of us. My sense of compassion includes them. The thing that I hear more often on my recordings than any other thing is some version of the phrase, help me.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever done an investigation where I didn't have at least one.
Help me, assist me.
Help me to do this. Help me to get out. Help me to leave. Please help me. Can you help me? Are you a doctor? I've heard things like that before. But the dead, the thing that they ask for more than anything else is some kind of help.
Yeah. Maybe they're not trying to, maybe certain people are not trying to scare. They're just confused.
I think
fumbling around.
99 times out of 100, the ghost is not interested in scaring you. He doesn't get anything from it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so if you want to get the ghost out of your house, you need to talk to other people. I will come and tell you what you have in your house, if there is something in your house. But cleansing, that's what they call it. That's not my business.
Gotcha. And then, last thing, ghost tours. You have tours that you offer too, don't you?
Used to.
Okay.
My partner in that ran an antique store out of the building that we took the people on. And she sort of is in a semi-retired phase right now. She didn't want to do it full time anymore. And the rent at the place was so high that unless you were doing antiquing full time, you couldn't afford the rent.
Right.
So we've lost the opportunity to investigate there.
Oh, man.
Well, it was going to happen sooner or later.
Right. Right.
And it changes the universal law of life.
Yeah.
But there's no shortage of places around here to investigate.
Yeah.
No shortage of ghosts.
Yeah, that's for sure. And now we've got a bunch more eyes on you, and can help open some doors for you. That's another thing too. I'm sure it's hard can be hard for an investigator, because unless I know you, why should I trust you in my home? I'm sure people can be shaking that way. So it's good to give you this 2-hour long discussion to just display your demeanor and your mannerisms, and display that you're a trustworthy guy.
I'm in it for legit reasons.
Yeah, I can see that.
I'm not casing your house to steal your TV. I've got a TV.
Yeah.
I've got everything I need.
You probably don't even watch it that much either.
I discontinued my cable like 2 years ago.
Smart.
I watch a DVD now and then.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so think of me as a scientist, not a showman. I'm not going to exploit you. If you have a problem in your house, I'm not going to put your name out there and or drag other people into it. It's not going to become like the haunting in Connecticut, where anybody who lives in that house has to build a fence around it to keep all the paranormal investigators out.
Right.
Discreet, on the level. If you have something going on, I will tell you what it is, and that'll be the end of it.
Beautiful. Great. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you
Patrick
for
Bishop
having me.
of Spook Group.
Yes, sir.
Podcast over. The Notcast. Thank you, Eric.